The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors of the Harrison estate, a sprawling mansion that sat on 12 acres of perfectly manicured grounds in the wealthy suburb of Westbrook Hills. The house belonged to Richard Harrison, a man whose name appeared regularly in financial magazines and business journals, though he preferred to keep his personal life intensely private. His fortune came from technology patents and strategic investments that had multiplied his wealth beyond what most people could comprehend in a lifetime. Yet despite all the money and success, Richard Harrison lived with a grief that no amount of wealth could ease. His son Daniel was 8 years old and had been blind since birth due to a rare genetic condition that affected his optic nerves. The doctors had tried everything available in modern medicine, consulting specialists from London to Tokyo, but the diagnosis remained unchanged. Daniel would never see the world the way others did. Richard had initially responded to this reality with determination, throwing resources at the problem as though it were a business challenge to be solved. He hired the best tutors, therapists, and specialists. He had the house modified with tactile paths and audio systems to help Daniel navigate independently. He purchased every assistive technology device that existed. But over time, Richard began to realize that his son needed something that money could not easily buy: genuine connection and simple joy. Daniel was a quiet child, introspective and gentle in ways that sometimes broke his father's heart. He spent most of his time alone, exploring the house by touch and sound, listening to audiobooks in his room, or sitting in the garden where he could feel the sun on his face and hear the birds. The parade of tutors and therapists came and went on strict schedules, each one professional and competent, but none of them seemed to reach the place inside Daniel that remained locked away. Richard watched his son from a distance, often standing in doorways or looking through windows, observing but somehow unable to bridge the gap between them. Work consumed most of his time, which he told himself was necessary to maintain the resources Daniel needed, but truthfully it was also an escape from the helplessness he felt at home. The household staff maintained the estate with quiet efficiency. There was Margaret, the head housekeeper who had been with the family for 15 years, and Thomas, the groundskeeper who kept the gardens in pristine condition. There was a chef who prepared nutritionally balanced meals that Daniel barely touched, and a driver who stood ready whenever transportation was needed. And there was Elena Santos, who had joined the staff 2 years ago as an assistant housekeeper. Elena was a woman in her mid-30s who had immigrated from the Philippines with her daughter, working long hours to build a better life than the one they had left behind. She was hardworking and kind, the sort of person who noticed small details and took pride in doing every task well, no matter how humble. Elena's daughter was named Sophia, and she was 9 years old, just 1 year older than Daniel. Sophia was everything her mother hoped she would be: bright, curious, respectful, and filled with a natural warmth that drew people to her. She had her mother's dark eyes and gentle smile, but she also possessed an independence and creativity that sometimes surprised Elena. Sophia attended the local public school, where she earned good grades despite English being her second language. She helped her mother after school and on weekends, though Elena tried to keep her daughter's involvement with the household work minimal. Elena wanted Sophia to focus on her education, to have opportunities that she herself had never been given. The Harrison estate had a music room that occupied the entire east wing of the second floor. It was a magnificent space with vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and tall windows that overlooked the gardens. The centerpiece of the room was a concert grand piano, a Steinway that had cost more than many people's homes. It had belonged to Richard's late wife, Catherine, who had been an accomplished pianist before her death in a car accident 4 years earlier. After Catherine died, the music room became a sort of shrine. Richard could not bring himself to go in there, and he had given strict instructions to the staff that the room should be maintained but otherwise left untouched. The piano sat silent, perfectly tuned twice a year by a specialist who came from the city but never played. Sophia had discovered the music room by accident 3 months after her mother started working at the estate. She had been helping Elena dust the second-floor hallways when she noticed the double doors with decorative glass panels. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she had peeked inside, seeing the grand piano gleaming in the afternoon light. Sophia had never seen anything so beautiful. At home, before they had left the Philippines, her grandmother had an old upright piano that was missing several keys and was perpetually out of tune. Her grandmother had taught Sophia simple songs, and the child had shown a natural aptitude for music. But here was an instrument that looked like something from a fairy tale. Elena had found Sophia standing in the doorway of the music room, staring at the piano with wide eyes. Her mother's immediate reaction had been alarm. This room was off-limits, special, not a place where the housekeeper's daughter should be wandering. Elena had quickly pulled Sophia away. explaining in hushed, urgent tones that they were guests in this house, that they must respect the family's privacy and rules, that their livelihood depended on being trustworthy and discreet. Sophia had apologized sincerely, but something in her expression told Alina that her daughter's fascination with that piano had not been extinguished, only suppressed. What Alina did not know was that Sophia had begun returning to the music room during the quiet hours of the late afternoon. She would wait until her homework was finished, and her mother was occupied with tasks in other parts of the house. Then she would slip upstairs, moving quietly in her worn sneakers, and enter the music room. She never meant to be disobedient. She told herself she would just spend a few minutes in that beautiful space. But the pull of the piano was too strong. The first time she touched the keys, pressing down gently on middle C, the pure tone that resonated through the room made her heart race with joy and fear in equal measure. She knew she should not be doing this, but the music called to something deep inside her that could not be denied. Sophia began to play the simple songs her grandmother had taught her, moving through the basic melodies and exercises that she remembered. Her technique was rough and her knowledge limited, but she had a natural sense of rhythm and an ear for harmony that made even simple tunes sound sweet. She played softly, always aware that she was breaking the rules, always listening for footsteps that might signal someone approaching. The music room became her secret sanctuary, a place where she could express feelings she did not have words for, where the worries about money and her mother's long work hours and being different at school all faded away. Daniel had been in his room one afternoon, sitting near the window, when he first heard the piano. The sound was faint, drifting through the hallways and ventilation systems of the large house, but to Daniel's sensitive ears it was clear and distinct. He sat very still, hardly breathing, just listening. Someone was playing his mother's piano. The music was simple and somewhat hesitant, not like the recordings his father sometimes played of professional pianists, but there was something alive about it, something warm. Daniel had no memory of his mother playing, as he had been too young before she died, but his father had told him stories about how she would fill the house with music in the evenings. This was the first time Daniel had heard that piano played by human hands rather than heard through speakers. His curiosity overwhelmed his usual caution. Daniel made his way out of his room, using the tactile guide rails that had been installed along the walls, counting doors and turns as he had been taught. He moved slowly toward the source of the music, his spatial awareness and memory guiding him. The music stopped and started several times, as though the player was practicing or trying to remember something. Daniel reached the music room and stood in the open doorway, listening intently, not wanting to interrupt. Sophia was so absorbed in playing that she did not notice Daniel at first. She was working through a folk song her grandmother had loved, trying to remember the middle section where the melody shifted to a minor key. When she finally paused and looked up, she saw the boy standing in the doorway and her heart nearly stopped. She recognized him immediately as the son of the house, the boy she sometimes saw being escorted by tutors or therapists, the one her mother had explained was blind and needed special consideration. Sophia's first instinct was panic. She had been caught, she would be in terrible trouble, her mother might lose her job because of this. Daniel spoke first, his voice soft and uncertain. "Please don't stop, that was really pretty." Sophia did not know what to say. She sat frozen on the piano bench, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm sorry," she finally managed. "I know I'm not supposed to be in here, I just wanted to play for a little while, I'll leave right now." "You play the piano?" Daniel asked, taking a tentative step into the room. He did not move like other children. His steps were careful and deliberate, one hand extended slightly in front of him. "A little bit," Sophia admitted. "My grandmother taught me some songs, but I'm not very good. I probably shouldn't touch such an expensive piano." "I've never heard anyone play it before," Daniel said. "I mean, not in person. My mom used to play, but I don't remember. I was too little." There was something in his voice that made Sophia's fear begin to recede, replaced by a different feeling. This boy seemed lonely, she thought. Despite living in this enormous house with everything money could buy, he seemed as isolated as she sometimes felt. "Do you want me to play something else?" Sophia asked carefully. Daniel's face brightened in a way that transformed his features. "Yes, please." Sophia turned back to the piano and began playing another simple melody, a lullaby her grandmother had sung to her when she was small. As she played, Daniel walked slowly into the room, navigating around furniture with practiced caution until he reached the piano. He stood near the side of it, his head tilted slightly, completely absorbed in the music and the way the sound vibrated through the instrument's massive body. When Sophia finished, Daniel said, "Can I touch it? The piano, I mean." "Of course," Sophia said. She did not feel like she had the authority to grant permission, but she also could not imagine refusing this boy something so simple. Daniel approached the piano bench and Sophia moved over to make room. He sat down carefully and placed his hands on the keys, pressing down randomly at first, then with more deliberation. The sounds he produced were discordant, but he seemed fascinated by the cause and effect, by the way his actions created these tones. "I could teach you something easy if you want," Sophia offered, "like a simple scale or something." "You would do that?" Daniel asked, turning his face toward her even though his eyes did not focus on anything specific. "Sure," Sophia said. "It's not hard here, give me your right hand." She took his hand gently and positioned his fingers on the keys, showing him middle C and the notes that followed in sequence. She played the C major scale slowly, letting him hear the pattern, then guided his fingers through the same motions. Daniel was a quick learner, his fingers finding the right keys after just a few repetitions. He played the scale up and down several times, a look of concentration and delight on his face. That afternoon marked the beginning of something neither child could have predicted. Sophia returned to the music room the next day, half expecting to find the doors locked or to be confronted by angry adults, but neither happened. Instead, she found Daniel already there, sitting in one of the armchairs near the piano, waiting. He heard her footsteps and smiled. "I was hoping you'd come back." They fell into an unspoken arrangement. Several times a week, during the late afternoon hours, Sophia would come to the music room and they would sit at the piano together. She taught him the basics that her grandmother had taught her, simple scales and melodies, the names of the notes and how to find them on the keyboard. Daniel absorbed everything with remarkable focus, his other senses compensating for his lack of sight. He developed an acute ear for pitch and rhythm, often catching his own mistakes before Sophia had to correct him. But their time together became more than just piano lessons. They talked while they played, sharing stories about their lives that were so vastly different, yet finding common ground in unexpected places. Sophia told Daniel about the Philippines, about her grandmother's house near the ocean, about the market where vendors sold fresh mangoes and fish, about the difficulties of learning English and adjusting to a new country. Daniel told Sophia about the loneliness of being different, about the frustration of not being able to do things other kids did easily, about missing a mother he could barely remember, about wanting his father to smile more. Sophia was struck by how normal Daniel seemed once you got past the fact that he could not see. He had a sense of humor that surprised her, making jokes about bumping into furniture or mixing up sounds. He asked questions about what things looked like, and Sophia tried her best to describe colors and visual details in ways that made sense to him. She talked about the texture of tree bark, the pattern of sunlight through leaves, the way rain made surfaces shiny, translating the visual world into terms of touch and sound and smell. Daniel, in turn, taught Sophia about experiencing the world differently. He showed her how to identify different birds by their calls, a skill he had developed from spending so much time listening in the garden. He demonstrated how you could tell what time of day it was by the quality of warmth from the windows, how different materials had different acoustic properties, how people had distinctive gaits that you could recognize from far away just by the sound of their footsteps. The music room, which had been a mausoleum of grief and memory, slowly came back to life. The piano was played almost daily now, filling the space with sound that ranged from halting scales to simple duets where Sophia played the melody and Daniel picked out a basic harmony. They progressed to more complex songs, with Sophia teaching Daniel pieces that stretched both their abilities. She found piano books in the music room's library and worked through them methodically, always staying just a few lessons ahead of Daniel so she could teach him. What neither child knew was that they were being watched. Richard Harrison had noticed the sound of the piano playing several weeks after Sophia and Daniel's first encounter. He had been in his study working through financial reports when the music drifted into his consciousness. His first reaction was shock. No one played that piano, no one was supposed to even enter that room without permission. He had stood up from his desk, intending to march upstairs and put a stop to whatever was happening, but something made him pause. The music was tentative and simple, clearly not a professional or even an advanced student. But it was genuine, unpolished, alive. Richard found himself drawn toward the sound rather than away from it. He climbed the stairs quietly and approached the music room, staying back from the doorway where he could listen without being seen. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. His son Daniel was sitting at the piano bench beside a young girl Richard did not immediately recognize. They were playing together, Daniel's small hands moving across the keys with concentration while the girl, who he realized must be the daughter of one of the staff, guided him gently, her voice soft as she counted the rhythm. But more than the music itself, it was Daniel's face that stunned Richard into stillness. His son was smiling, genuinely smiling, in a way Richard had not seen in longer than he could remember. Daniel looked engaged, happy, connected to another person in a way that all the expensive therapists and specialized programs had failed to achieve. Richard stood frozen in the hallway, a complex storm of emotions washing over him. There was an initial flash of anger that the rules had been broken, that this girl had entered a private space without permission. But that anger was quickly overwhelmed by something else. Watching his son interact so naturally with this child, seeing Daniel laugh when he played a wrong note and then try again with determination, witnessing the easy friendship between them, Richard felt a crack forming in the wall he had built around his grief. He wanted to step forward to announce his presence, to take control of the situation as he did with everything else in his life. But something held him back. Some instinct told him that if he intervened now, this fragile thing that had formed between these two children might shatter. Daniel had tutors and therapists precisely because Richard did not know how to reach his son, how to give him what he needed beyond material support. And here was this girl, this daughter of an employee, doing effortlessly what all of Richard's resources had not accomplished. So Richard did something completely uncharacteristic for a man who had built an empire on decisive action and control. He did nothing. He quietly stepped back from the doorway and returned to his study. But he did not return to his work. He sat in his leather chair, staring out the window at the grounds below, thinking about what he had witnessed. Over the following weeks, Richard found himself drawn repeatedly to observe Sophia and Daniel's piano sessions. He learned to time his presence so he could listen without being detected, standing in the hallway or sometimes in the adjacent room where the sound carried clearly. He heard his son's progress at the piano, the way Daniel's playing became more confident and fluid. He heard their conversations and laughter. He heard Sophia's patient teaching and Daniel's eager questions. He heard his son opening up about feelings and experiences that Daniel had never shared with his father. Through these observations, Richard began to piece together information about Sophia. He made discreet inquiries with Margaret, the head housekeeper, learning that the girl was the daughter of Elena Santos, one of the assistant housekeepers. Margaret spoke highly of both mother and daughter, noting that Elena was reliable and hardworking, that she had immigrated to provide better opportunities for her child, that Sophia was polite and helpful on the occasions when she was at the estate. Margaret seemed unaware of Sophia's visits to the music room, and Richard did not enlighten her. Richard also began to notice Elena herself with new attention. She was a quiet presence in the household, someone who had blended into the background of his awareness in the way that staff often did for people of his class. But now he observed her more carefully during the brief moments when their paths crossed in the house. He saw the tiredness in her face at the end of long days, but also the dignity in how she carried herself. He noticed the worn quality of her clothes and shoes, the careful way she moved through the expensive spaces of the house as though afraid to disturb anything. He realized that while he was paying her a fair wage by standard measures, it was likely barely enough to cover rent and necessities in this expensive area, leaving little room for extras like music lessons for a talented daughter. The irony was not lost on Richard. Here he was, a man who could buy almost anything, whose son had access to every educational advantage money could provide, and yet his child was finding genuine joy and growth through an unauthorized friendship with the daughter of one of his employees. It challenged assumptions Richard had not even realized he held about value and worth, about what money could and could not accomplish, about the different forms that privilege and poverty could take. As Richard listened to another piano session, he heard Sophia teaching Daniel a piece that was beyond what he would have expected either child to play. They were working through it slowly, section by section, with Sophia demonstrating and Daniel attempting to replicate what she played. His son made mistakes and got frustrated, but Sophia's response was patient and encouraging. "It's okay," she said. "Everyone makes mistakes when they're learning. Just try that measure again and remember to keep your thumb tucked. You're doing really well." Daniel tried again, and this time he got through the difficult passage. "I did it," he exclaimed with pure joy. "You did." Sophia agreed, and Richard could hear the genuine pride in her voice. "Now let's try putting it together with the part before it." Richard found himself smiling as he listened, an expression that felt foreign on his face lately. When was the last time he had felt such uncomplicated happiness on his son's behalf? When was the last time he had been present enough in Daniel's life to witness these small victories? The realization settled over Richard with uncomfortable weight. He had been so focused on managing his grief over Catherine's death, on building and maintaining his business empire, on providing material resources for Daniel's care, that he had somehow failed to simply be there for his son in the ways that mattered most. He had hired people to do the work of connecting with Daniel because he did not know how, or perhaps because it was too painful to try and fail. And in doing so, he had created a distance between himself and his child that all his wealth could not bridge. But this girl, this 9-year-old daughter of his housekeeper, had walked into his son's life and done what no paid professional had managed. She had seen Daniel as simply another kid who wanted to learn and play and be friends. She had shared her own knowledge freely, without being paid or assigned to do so, purely from kindness and perhaps her own need for friendship. And in return, Daniel had blossomed in ways Richard had thought might be impossible. Richard knew he faced a decision. He could shut this down, enforce the boundaries that technically had been violated, maintain the proper separation between employer and employee families. It would be the safe choice, the controlled choice, the one that protected against complications and messiness. Or he could allow this friendship to continue, acknowledge that something valuable and real had formed without his planning or permission. The piano music floated through the house, two children creating something beautiful together, and Richard Harrison sat alone in his study, confronting the limitations of his power and the unexpected grace of connection that arose when he simply stepped back and let life unfold without his control. The music room sessions continued through the changing seasons. And as autumn gradually gave way to the first hints of winter, the friendship between Sophia and Daniel deepened in ways that transformed both children. What had started as informal piano lessons evolved into something more profound, a genuine bond that transcended the vast economic divide between their families. They were no longer just teacher and student, but true friends who looked forward to their time together with an eagerness that colored their entire days. Sophia had developed a routine that allowed her to balance her schoolwork, helping her mother, and her secret afternoon sessions with Daniel. She would arrive home from school around 3:30, quickly complete her homework at the small kitchen table in the staff quarters where she and her mother lived, then make her way to the music room by 4 o'clock. Daniel was almost always there waiting, having arranged his schedule of tutors and therapists to leave that time free. His father had noticed the pattern, though Daniel remained unaware of this, and had quietly instructed the household staff to ensure Daniel's late afternoon remained unscheduled. The children's musical repertoire had expanded considerably. Sophia had worked her way through several basic piano instruction books she found in the music room's extensive library, teaching herself new pieces so she could then teach Daniel. Her own skills had improved dramatically through this process of staying ahead of her student. She discovered that teaching someone else forced her to understand the music more deeply, to break down complex passages into manageable components, to articulate concepts she had previously only felt intuitively. Daniel, meanwhile, proved to be a remarkably dedicated student. His inability to read sheet music in the traditional way had initially seemed like an insurmountable obstacle. But Sophia had found creative solutions, describing the movement of melodies as going up or down, teaching him to feel the patterns and intervals between notes, helping him memorize pieces through repetition and association. They had recently begun working on a simplified arrangement of Claude Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece that Sophia had heard in a movie and become enchanted with. It was far beyond what either child should have been able to play at their level. But Sophia's determination and Daniel's surprising musical sensitivity were gradually bringing the piece to life. They would spend entire sessions working on just 8 or 16 measures, with Sophia playing a phrase and describing its emotional quality, then guiding Daniel's hands to find the right keys and touch to recreate that feeling. On a gray November afternoon, with rain pattering steadily against the tall windows of the music room, Sophia and Daniel sat side by side at the piano, working through a particularly challenging section of the Debussy piece. The arpeggiated passages required a delicate touch and careful pedaling, technical demands that pushed both children to the edge of their abilities. "Remember, this part is supposed to sound like moonlight on water," Sophia said, playing the section slowly. "See how the notes kind of shimmer and flow? You have to keep your wrist loose and let your fingers just barely touch the keys." Daniel listened intently, his head tilted in that characteristic way he had when concentrating on sounds. "Play it again," he requested. "I want to hear exactly how long you hold each note before moving to the next one." Sophia repeated the passage, exaggerating the timing slightly so Daniel could better perceive the rhythm. He nodded slowly, his fingers twitching slightly as though playing an invisible piano, mentally mapping the movements he would need to make. "Okay, I think I understand," Daniel said. He positioned his hands over the keys, took a breath to center himself, and began to play. His version was slower and less fluid than Sophia's, but there was something in his interpretation that caught the essence of the piece. He was not just hitting the right notes in the right order, he was genuinely trying to create the feeling of moonlight and water through sound. "That was beautiful," Sophia said softly when he finished. "Really, Daniel. You're getting so good at this." Daniel smiled, a flush of pride coloring his cheeks. "It's because you're a good teacher, and because I can practice the pieces in my head even when I'm not at the piano. I go through the whole thing, imagining what each note sounds like and where my fingers need to go." "That's amazing," Sophia said. "I can't do that, I need to see the keys and the music." "Well, you can see," Daniel pointed out. So it makes sense that you would use your eyes, I just have to use what I have. There was no self-pity in his statement, just a simple acknowledgement of his reality. This was something Sophia had come to admire deeply about Daniel. He did not spend time wishing he could see or feeling sorry for himself. He simply found ways to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish using the abilities he possessed. It was a resilience that sometimes put Sophia's own complaints about her circumstances into perspective. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said, his fingers idly playing random soft notes on the piano. "What do I look like?" "I mean, I know I'm a kid and I'm told I have brown hair, but I don't really know what that means. What do you see when you look at me?" The question caught Sophia off guard. In all their time together, Daniel had never asked her to describe him. She looked at him carefully, considering how to put her observations into words that would mean something to someone who had never seen a face. "Well," she began slowly, "you have hair that's the color of chocolate, the really dark kind, and it's sort of wavy. It falls over your forehead a little bit. Your face is kind of oval-shaped, and you have a nose that's just regular, I guess, not too big or too small. Your eyes are brown too, lighter than your hair, more like caramel, and even though they don't see things, they're still expressive. Like right now, they're pointed toward me and they look interested and a little bit nervous. You have a nice smile that makes your whole face look happy when you use it." Daniel touched his own face as she spoke, as though trying to feel the features she described. "What about you?" he asked. "I know what you sound like, and I know your hands are smaller than mine, but I don't know what you look like either." Sophia had never really thought about how to describe herself. "My hair is black and straight, and it goes down to about the middle of my back. My mom says I look like my grandmother. I have brown eyes that are darker than yours, and my skin is brown too, darker than yours because my family is from the Philippines. I'm shorter than you by maybe this much." She held up her hand to indicate a few inches, then realized the gesture was useless and added, "Maybe 3 or 4 inches. I have a small scar on my chin from when I fell off a swing when I was little." "Can I touch your face?" Daniel asked hesitantly. "That's how I understand what people really look like. If that's weird, you can say no." "It's not weird," Sophia assured him. "Go ahead." Daniel reached out carefully and Sophia guided his hand to her face. His fingers moved gently across her features, tracing the shape of her forehead, her eyebrows, the bridge of her nose, her cheeks, her chin. His touch was light and respectful, almost clinical in its careful exploration. Sophia held very still, feeling oddly vulnerable under this examination that was so different from simply being looked at. "You have a kind face," Daniel said when he finished. "I can tell from the way your smile moves. Some people you can feel that their smile is just with their mouth, but yours goes all the way up to your eyes. My mobility teacher told me about that once. She said that real smiles use different muscles than fake ones." "I didn't know that," Sophia said, touched by his observation. "But I'm glad I have a kind face. That's a nice thing to have." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the rain continuing its steady rhythm against the windows. The music room felt like its own world, separate from everything outside, a space where the usual rules and boundaries did not apply. Here they were just two kids who loved music and enjoyed each other's company, with no awareness of how unusual their friendship appeared from the outside. "Sophia," Daniel said quietly, "can I tell you something I've never told anyone else?" "Of course," Sophia replied, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "Sometimes I'm glad I'm blind," Daniel said, the words coming out in a rush as though he had been holding them in for a long time. "I know that sounds crazy, and I know my dad would be upset if he heard me say it because he's spent so much money trying to fix me. But being blind is just who I am, and there are things about it that are actually good. Like I notice sounds and textures that other people miss. I can tell things about people from their voices that you probably can't hear. And I don't judge people by what they look like, which my therapist says is something that makes life harder for a lot of people." He paused, seeming to gather his courage before continuing. "But the main reason I'm glad is because I think if I could see, you and I might not be friends. You'd be the housekeeper's daughter and I'd be the rich kid, and maybe we wouldn't even talk to each other. But because I can't see those differences, we got to know each other as just people. Does that make sense?" Sophia felt a lump forming in her throat. Daniel had articulated something she had felt but never quite put into words. Their friendship existed in a space where the visible markers of class and privilege were less relevant, where they could meet as equals because Daniel literally could not see the differences between them. "It makes perfect sense," Sophia said softly, "and I'm glad too, even though I wish you didn't have to be blind. I'm glad we're friends. You're the best friend I've ever had." "Really?" Daniel asked, his face lighting up. "You're my best friend too. Actually, you're my only real friend. The other kids in my therapy groups are nice, but we only see each other during sessions, and it always feels like we're just a bunch of blind kids who got put together, not like we chose to be friends. But with you, it feels real." They were so absorbed in their conversation that neither child noticed the figure standing in the hallway outside the music room. Richard Harrison had arrived home earlier than usual, having cut short a meeting in the city because he found himself wanting to hear his son's piano session. He had been standing there for several minutes, listening to the children's conversation with an intensity that made his chest feel tight. Hearing Daniel express gladness about his blindness had struck Richard like a physical blow. For years, he had viewed his son's condition as a tragedy to be overcome, a problem to be solved, a source of grief and guilt. He had never considered that Daniel might have made peace with it in ways that Richard himself had not. And hearing his son describe their friendship in such stark terms, acknowledging that economic inequality might have prevented them from connecting if circumstances had been different, forced Richard to confront uncomfortable truths about the world he had created around his family. Richard had grown up wealthy, the son of successful parents, and had multiplied that wealth through his own intelligence and drive. He believed he had earned his success through hard work and merit, and he treated his employees fairly by the standards of his class. But he had never really questioned the structure itself, the invisible walls that separated people into different categories based on wealth and status. He had never considered how many potential friendships, connections, and sources of joy might be cut off by those divisions. Watching his son bloom through this unauthorized friendship with an employee's child was forcing Richard to reconsider assumptions he had never even realized he held. What did it say about his world that the best thing to happen to his son in years had occurred only because rules were broken and boundaries were crossed? What did it say about him that he had been unable to reach his own child in the ways this 9-year-old girl had managed so naturally? The children had returned to playing the piano, working together on the Debussy piece with a focus and harmony that spoke of many hours of practice together. Richard listened to the music and to their easy collaboration, feeling like an outsider looking in on his own son's life. He knew he could not remain a silent observer indefinitely. At some point, he would need to acknowledge what was happening to make decisions about how to proceed. But each time he resolved to step forward and take control of the situation, something held him back. The following week brought a development that would force Richard's hand. Elena Santos, Sophia's mother, had requested a meeting with Margaret, the head housekeeper, and Margaret had subsequently asked to speak with Richard. He met with her in his study on a Tuesday morning before the household was fully active. Margaret was a woman in her early 60s who had been managing the Harrison household since before Daniel was born. She was efficient, discreet, and had an almost maternal protectiveness toward the family. She stood in Richard's study with her usual professional bearing, but he could see she was uncomfortable about something. "Mr. Harrison, I apologize for bringing this to your attention, but I felt you should know," Margaret began. "Elena Santos came to me yesterday with concerns about her daughter Sophia. Apparently the girl has been spending time in the music room with Master Daniel." Richard kept his expression neutral, though his pulse quickened. "I see. What is Elena concerned about?" "She only recently discovered this was happening," Margaret explained. Sophia had not told her mother about the piano sessions, knowing that Elena would consider it inappropriate. "Elena is worried that Sophia has been disturbing Master Daniel or overstepping boundaries. She's very apologetic and has assured me it won't happen again. She's quite upset, actually, worried that this might affect her position here." Richard stood and walked to the window, his back to Margaret, using the moment to consider his response carefully. He had known this moment would come eventually, that the secret friendship could not remain hidden forever. Now he needed to decide how to handle it in a way that would not damage what Daniel had found. "How did Elena discover this?" Richard asked. "I gather one of the other staff members mentioned seeing Sophia going to the music room regularly," Margaret said. "Elena confronted her daughter and Sophia confessed everything. Elena is mortified. She's raised her daughter to be respectful and to understand boundaries, and she sees this as a failure of her parenting." Richard turned back to face Margaret. "What is your assessment of the situation? You've been with this family a long time. I trust your judgment." Margaret seemed surprised by the question, but she considered it carefully before responding. "Sir, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I've seen a change in Master Daniel over the past several months. He seems happier, more engaged with life. I've heard him laughing more. He's been eating better at meals. Whatever has been happening in that music room appears to have been good for him." "I agree," Richard said simply. "I've been aware of the situation, Margaret. I've known about the piano sessions since shortly after they began." Margaret's eyes widened slightly. "You have, sir?" "I have. I've observed them occasionally, always from a distance. Daniel doesn't know I'm aware of this friendship." Richard paused, choosing his words with care. "My son has been happier these past months than I've seen him since his mother died. This girl, Sophia, has given him something that all my resources and all the professionals I've hired have not been able to provide. She's given him a genuine friendship and a sense of normalcy. I see, Margaret said slowly. Then what would you like me to tell Alina? Tell her that I would like to speak with her directly, Richard said. This afternoon, if possible. Tell her she is not in any trouble, nor is her daughter. Tell her I simply wish to discuss the situation. Margaret nodded, though Richard could see the curiosity in her expression. She was too professional to ask the questions clearly forming in her mind. I'll arrange it, sir. Will 2 o'clock work for you? That will be fine. Please use the informal sitting room rather than my study. I don't want this to feel like a formal reprimand. After Margaret left, Richard stood alone in his study, feeling the weight of the conversation to come. He needed to handle this carefully. Alina Santos was in a vulnerable position, dependent on this job to support herself and her daughter in an expensive area where opportunities for immigrants without advanced degrees were limited. She would be anxious, possibly expecting to be fired or at least severely reprimanded. Richard needed to find a way to acknowledge the boundary crossing while also recognizing the value of what had developed between the children. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, Richard made his way to the informal sitting room, a smaller, more comfortable space that the family used for casual conversations. Alina Santos was already there, sitting rigidly on the edge of one of the armchairs, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She stood quickly when Richard entered, her face showing barely controlled anxiety. Please sit down, Mrs. Santos, Richard said gently, taking a seat in the chair across from her rather than positioning himself in a way that emphasized the power differential between them. I want to thank you for agreeing to speak with me. Mr. Harrison, I am so very sorry, Alina began, the words tumbling out in a rush. I had no idea Sophia was going into the music room. I taught her to be respectful, to understand her place, to not disturb your family. I am ashamed that she disobeyed the rules of your house. It will not happen again. I have told her she cannot go to that room anymore. Please, I need this job. My daughter and I, we have nowhere else to go. Richard raised his hand to gently stop her. Mrs. Santos, please, you're not in trouble, neither is Sophia. I asked to speak with you because I want to explain something important. Alina looked confused, clearly not understanding where this conversation was heading. The fear in her eyes did not diminish. I've known about the piano sessions for quite some time, Richard continued. I've been aware that Sophia and Daniel have been spending time together in the music room. I've observed them occasionally, always without their knowledge. Alina's face went pale. You knew, but sir, if you knew and did not stop it, I don't understand. I didn't stop it because it's the best thing that has happened to my son in years, Richard said simply. Mrs. Santos, I don't know if you understand how isolated Daniel has been. Yes, he has tutors and therapists and every material advantage. But he's had no real friends, no peer relationships that weren't structured and supervised by adults. He's been lonely in ways that I've been unable to address. Richard leaned forward slightly, his voice becoming more earnest. Your daughter has given Daniel something precious. She's treated him as a normal child who happens to be blind, rather than as a blind child who needs special treatment. She's shared her knowledge of music freely, and in doing so, she's helped Daniel discover a passion and a talent I didn't know he had. More importantly, she's given him friendship, real, genuine friendship. Alina's hands had loosened their tight grip slightly, though she still looked uncertain. Sophia talks about Daniel sometimes, she said quietly. She tells me about teaching him piano, about the songs they practice together. I can see that she cares about him, but Mr. Harrison, this is not appropriate. I am your employee. My daughter should not be in your family's private spaces. People will talk. They will say I am trying to take advantage, that I am using my position to push my daughter into your world where she does not belong. Her words carried layers of meaning, speaking to experiences of judgment and prejudice that Richard could only partially understand. He recognized that Alina was navigating complex social terrain, trying to maintain dignity and security in a world where people in her position could be viewed with suspicion if they crossed certain invisible lines. What people might say concerns me less than my son's well-being, Richard said firmly. And I believe continuing this friendship would be good for both children. Sophia appears to benefit from it as well. Daniel tells me she's teaching him, but from what I've observed, she's also learning and growing through the experience. She is, Alina admitted. Sophia loves music, but we cannot afford lessons. I work long hours, and there is no money left over for things like that. Playing your beautiful piano and teaching Daniel has made her so happy. But Mr. Harrison, happiness is not enough reason to break the rules of your house. Richard appreciated her integrity, the way she was holding to principles even when offered an easier path. It spoke well of her character and explained much about how she had raised Sophia to be the kind of child who would befriend his son without expectation of reward. Mrs. Santos, I'm not suggesting we break any rules. I'm suggesting we change them, Richard said. I would like to formally give Sophia permission to use the music room and to continue her friendship with Daniel. I'm not asking you to approve of something happening behind your back. I'm asking if you would allow it to continue with full knowledge and my explicit support." Elena looked torn, her expression showing the internal struggle between what this opportunity could mean for Sophia and her deep discomfort with the situation. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "You are a very important man. Your son will grow up in a different world than my daughter. This friendship, it cannot last forever. Different lives will take them in different directions. Is it kind to let them become close when they will eventually have to separate?" It was a fair question, one that Richard had considered himself during his observations. "I don't know what the future holds," he admitted. "You're right that our children will likely follow very different paths as they grow older. But that's true of many childhood friendships. People's lives diverge, circumstances change. That doesn't mean the friendship has no value. The joy and growth they're experiencing now is real and important, regardless of what happens later." He paused, then added more quietly, "My son lost his mother when he was very young. He lives with a disability that sets him apart from other children. He spends most of his time with adults who are paid to care for him and educate him. He's wealthy beyond what most people can imagine, but he's been profoundly lonely. Sophia has given him something that money cannot buy. How can I put a price on that? How can I deny him this happiness because of concerns about propriety or what might happen years from now?" Elena was silent for a long moment, her eyes showing the weight of the decision before her. "If I say yes," she finally spoke, "I do not want Sophia to have expectations. She must understand that Daniel is your son and she is the housekeeper's daughter. This is a gift you are giving, but it is not changing who we are or where we belong." "I understand," Richard said, though her words stung in ways he had not anticipated. She was right, of course. The structural inequality between their families remained regardless of the friendship between their children, but hearing it stated so plainly forced him to confront the inherent unfairness of the situation. "And I must ask," Elena continued, her voice stronger now, "that if you ever decide this should end, you tell me directly. Do not let Sophia's heart be broken without warning. Do not let her think she has done something wrong if circumstances change. She is 9 years old. She does not understand the complicated adult world." "You have my word," Richard said solemnly. "If circumstances change, I will discuss it with you first, and we will handle it in a way that is kind to both children." Elena nodded slowly, a decision settling over her features. "Then yes, Sophia may continue to see Daniel. But I will speak with her about understanding her place and being respectful of your family's privacy in all other ways." They discussed a few practical details, establishing that Sophia would continue to come in the late afternoons after school, that she would enter and leave through appropriate entrances, that the music room was the extent of the house she should access without specific permission. Elena maintained her insistence on clear boundaries, and Richard respected her need to protect her daughter and their position in the household. As Elena stood to leave, Richard said, "Mrs. Santos, thank you. And please know that I have great respect for how you've raised your daughter. Sophia is clearly a remarkable child, and that's a reflection of your parenting." Elena's composure cracked slightly at this unexpected praise. Her eyes brightened with unshed tears. "Thank you, sir. That means more than you know. I try my best with her. I want her to have opportunities I never had." After Elena left, Richard remained in the sitting room processing the conversation. He had taken a step forward, moved from silent observation to active facilitation of the children's friendship. It felt right, but it also felt frightening. He was allowing his son to become attached to someone who, as Elena had pointed out, might not remain in their lives permanently. He was crossing social boundaries that existed for complicated historical reasons. He was making decisions that other people in his social circle would likely question or criticize. But when he thought of Daniel's face during those piano sessions, the genuine joy and engagement he saw there, Richard knew he had made the right choice. Some things mattered more than maintaining comfortable boundaries. Some risks were worth taking. His son's happiness was certainly one of them. That evening, Daniel came to dinner with an unusual energy about him. They ate together in the formal dining room, just the two of them at opposite ends of a long table that could seat 16, an arrangement that had always struck Richard as somewhat absurd, but which he had never bothered to change. "Dad," Daniel said during the meal, his voice carrying a nervousness that immediately caught Richard's attention. "Yes, Daniel. I need to tell you something, and I'm worried you might be angry." Daniel's fingers played with his napkin, a sign of his anxiety. Richard felt his heart rate increase, wondering if Daniel had somehow learned about his conversation with Elena. "You can tell me anything, son. What's on your mind?" Daniel took a breath, then spoke in a rush. "I've been spending time with Sophia. She's the daughter of one of the housekeepers. We've been playing piano together in the music room. I know I probably should have asked permission first. And I know Mom's piano is special and maybe I shouldn't have let someone else play it. But Sophia is really nice and she's teaching me and we're friends now and I don't want to stop seeing her." The words came out in an almost continuous stream, as though Daniel had been holding them in for a long time and needed to expel them all at once before his courage failed. When he finished, he sat very still, waiting for his father's response with obvious trepidation. Richard felt a wave of emotion wash over him, a mixture of sadness that his son had felt the need to keep this secret and relief that Daniel was finally being honest with him. He stood from his chair and walked the length of the table to sit in the chair next to Daniel, closing some of the physical distance that had characterized their relationship for too long. "Daniel, I'm not angry," Richard said gently. "In fact, I'm glad you found a friend, and I'm glad you're playing the piano. Your mother would have loved knowing that you're making music in her music room." Daniel's face registered shock. "You're not mad, really? Really? I've actually known about your piano sessions with Sophia for a while now. I've listened sometimes from outside the room. You've gotten very good." "You knew?" Daniel's voice rose with surprise. "Why didn't you say anything?" It was a fair question, one Richard had been asking himself. "I suppose I wasn't sure how to approach it," he admitted. "I saw how happy you were, and I didn't want to interfere with something that was clearly good for you. But I should have talked to you about it sooner. I'm sorry for that." Daniel was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then he asked, "So Sophia and I can keep being friends? We can keep playing piano together?" "Yes. I spoke with her mother today, and we agreed that you two can continue spending time together. Sophia has permission to come to the music room." Sophia has permission to come to the music room. A smile spread across Daniel's face, transforming his features with pure joy. "Really? That's amazing. I was so scared you'd make her stop coming. She's my best friend, Dad. She doesn't treat me like I'm broken or like she has to be extra careful around me. She just treats me like I'm normal." The word broken hit Richard hard. Is that how his son felt? Like something broken that needed to be fixed. All the therapies and interventions and specialists that Richard had arranged with the best intentions, had they inadvertently sent Daniel the message that he was fundamentally flawed? "Daniel, you're not broken," Richard said firmly. "You're blind, yes, but that doesn't make you less than anyone else. It's just one aspect of who you are." "I know that," Daniel said. "But sometimes it feels like everyone is trying to fix me or work around my blindness. Sophia is the first person who doesn't make me feel that way. She just helps me learn to play piano the same way she would help anyone learn. She describes things to me when I need it, but she doesn't make a big deal about it." They talked for another hour, the longest real conversation father and son had shared in months. Daniel told Richard about the music he and Sophia were learning, about their friendship, about how Sophia described the world to him in ways that made sense. Richard listened, truly listened, hearing not just the words but the emotion and meaning behind them. He realized how much he had missed by maintaining distance, by hiding behind work and grief, and the assumption that professionals could meet his son's needs better than he could. When Daniel finally went up to bed, Richard sat alone in the dining room, feeling as though something fundamental had shifted. He had spent years trying to manage and control his son's life from a distance, believing that providing resources and hiring experts was the same as being present. But Daniel's friendship with Sophia had shown him otherwise. Sometimes the most valuable things could not be bought or scheduled or managed. Sometimes connection happened in unauthorized spaces between unlikely people in ways that defied planning and control. Richard climbed the stairs to the second floor and found himself walking toward the music room. He had not entered that space since Catherine's death, had not been able to face the memories it held. But now he opened the doors and stepped inside. The grand piano sat in the center of the room, illuminated by moonlight streaming through the tall windows. He walked to it slowly and sat down on the bench where his son and Sophia sat together most afternoons. He touched the keys gently, not really playing, just feeling the smooth ivory and ebony beneath his fingers. Catherine had played this piano every day when she was alive, filling their home with music. After she died, the silence had seemed appropriate, a form of respect for what had been lost. But now Daniel was bringing music back into this space, creating new memories while honoring his mother's love of the piano. Richard realized that he had been holding onto grief so tightly that he had forgotten how to let joy back in. He had been so focused on what his family had lost that he had failed to see what still remained and what new things might be possible. A 9-year-old girl who knew nothing of his world had walked into his son's life and reminded them both that connection and growth were still possible, that music could still fill empty spaces, that friendship could bridge divides that seemed insurmountable. He sat at the piano for a long time that night, not playing but simply being present in that room, letting himself remember Catherine without being crushed by the grief, imagining the sounds of children's laughter and music lessons, feeling grateful for unexpected gifts that came in unauthorized packages. The weeks following Richard's conversation with Alina brought subtle but significant changes to the Harrison household. The music room, once a silent memorial, now held an officially sanctioned place in the daily rhythm of the estate. Sophia no longer had to slip quietly through hallways, glancing over her shoulder with nervous energy. Instead, she arrived each afternoon at 4 o'clock, walking with more confidence, though still maintaining the respectful demeanor her mother had instilled in her. Alina had spoken with Sophia at length the night after meeting with Richard, explaining the situation with careful precision. She wanted her daughter to understand the generosity being extended to them while also grasping the boundaries that still existed. They sat together in their small apartment in the staff quarters, a modest two-room space that was comfortable but a stark contrast to the grandeur of the main house. "This is a gift, Sophia," Alina had said, holding her daughter's hands in her own. "Mr. Harrison is being very kind to allow this friendship to continue. But you must remember that it is his kindness, not something we are owed. You must always be respectful, always remember that this is his home and his son. Do you understand?" Sophia had nodded solemnly, absorbing her mother's words with the seriousness they deserved. At 9 years old, she did not fully comprehend all the social complexities her mother was trying to convey, but she understood enough. She understood that they were guests in this world of wealth and privilege, that their position was fundamentally different from Daniel's, that gratitude and respect should guide her actions. But understanding these things intellectually did not change the simple truth of her friendship with Daniel. When they sat together at the piano, working through scales and melodies, laughing at mistakes and celebrating breakthroughs, the abstract concepts of class and status faded into irrelevance. They were just two children who loved music and enjoyed each other's company. The piano did not care who was rich and who was poor. The notes sounded the same regardless of who played them. Richard had made good on his promise to be more present in Daniel's life, though he struggled with exactly how to accomplish this. Years of emotional distance and workaholic habits could not be overcome instantly. He still spent long hours in his study, still took frequent calls from business associates, still traveled occasionally for meetings that could not be conducted remotely. But he also began joining Daniel for breakfast each morning, a meal he had previously skipped or taken alone in his study. He asked questions about Daniel's day, about his studies, about the music he was learning. The conversations were sometimes awkward, both father and son navigating unfamiliar territory, but they were trying. Richard also continued his practice of listening to the piano sessions, though now without the sense of secrecy that had previously characterized his observations. He would often finish his work around 4:30 and make his way to the vicinity of the music room, standing where he could hear the music and the children's voices. Sometimes he found himself smiling at their exchanges, at Sophia's patient teaching and Daniel's determined practice. Other times he felt a pang of something like envy, wishing he knew how to connect with his son as naturally as this young girl did. One Thursday afternoon in early December, Richard was listening to a piano session when he heard Sophia teaching Daniel a Christmas carol. Her voice carried clearly through the hallway as she sang along with the melody she was playing, helping Daniel understand the rhythm and phrasing. She had a sweet, clear voice, untrained but naturally musical. "Okay, now you try the right hand part while I play the left hand," Sophia instructed. "Remember, this is supposed to sound joyful, like Christmas morning when you're excited to see what's under the tree." "We don't really do Christmas in a big way," Daniel said, positioning his hands on the keys. "I mean, we have a tree and some decorations, but it's usually just quiet. Dad gives me presents, but it doesn't feel like the Christmas that people describe in movies." Sophia was quiet for a moment before responding. "Christmas is different for everyone, I think. My mom and I can't afford big presents, but we always make special food and we go to church and we call my grandmother in the Philippines. It feels special because we're together and we're remembering all the people we love, even the ones far away." "That sounds nice," Daniel said sincerely. "The together part, I think that's probably more important than the presents." Their exchange struck Richard with unexpected force. His son was right. Christmas at the Harrison estate had become a hollow exercise, expensive gifts exchanged without real joy, decorations put up by staff because tradition demanded it. A day marked on the calendar but not celebrated in any meaningful sense. It had been that way since Catherine died. She had loved Christmas, had filled the house with music and laughter and warmth during the holidays. After losing her, Richard had gone through the motions but could not recreate the spirit she had brought to the season. But perhaps this year could be different. Perhaps this year, with Daniel happier than he had been in years, with new music filling the house, with the unexpected gift of Sophia's presence in their lives, perhaps Christmas could hold some genuine meaning again. Richard made a decision. He waited until the piano session ended and Sophia had left for the day, then went to find Daniel in his room. His son was organizing his Braille books, arranging them on his shelf by subject matter, a system he had developed to keep track of his growing collection. "Daniel, can we talk for a minute?" Richard asked from the doorway. "Sure, Dad, come in." Daniel turned from his bookshelf, his face showing mild curiosity about this unusual mid-evening visit. Richard entered and sat on the edge of Daniel's bed, a casual intimacy that felt both natural and strange. "I heard you and Sophia practicing Christmas music today." "Yeah, she's teaching me Jingle Bells and Silent Night. She says every piano player should know some Christmas songs." Daniel smiled at the memory. "She's really good at explaining how to make the music sound like what it's supposed to be about. Like she told me that Silent Night should sound peaceful and gentle, so you have to use a soft touch and slow tempo." "She's a good teacher," Richard agreed. "Daniel, I was thinking about what you said about how we don't really do Christmas in a big way. Would you like that to change? Would you like to make this Christmas more special?" Daniel's expression showed surprise mixed with cautious hope. "What do you mean?" "I mean actually celebrating. Maybe we could invite people over, have some music, make it feel less empty. What if we had a Christmas Eve gathering, nothing too formal but something with life in it? We could have Sophia and her mother come, and Margaret and the other staff members who want to attend. We could have music and good food and actual celebration." "Really?" Daniel's voice rose with excitement. "We could do that. And Sophia could come." "If her mother agrees, yes. I thought maybe you and Sophia could play some of those Christmas songs you're learning, a little concert for our guests. Would you like that?" Daniel's face was radiant with enthusiasm. "I would love that. Do you think we'd be good enough? We've only been working on the Christmas music for a little while." "I think you'd be wonderful," Richard said warmly. "You've both become quite skilled, and it's not about being perfect. It's about sharing something you love with people who care about you." They discussed the idea further, with Daniel contributing suggestions about songs to learn and foods he thought they should serve. Richard found himself genuinely enjoying the planning conversation, seeing a side of his son that had been dormant for too long. Daniel had opinions and ideas, enthusiasm and creativity. He was not just the tragic blind child that Richard had been unconsciously reducing him to in his mind. He was a full person with interests and agency and the capacity for joy. The next afternoon, Richard asked Alina if she would be willing to speak with him again. They met in the same informal sitting room where they had talked before, though this time Alina seemed less anxious, more settled in the understanding that she was not in trouble. "Mrs. Santos, thank you for meeting with me," Richard began. "I wanted to discuss something with you, and I want to make it clear from the start that you should feel completely free to say no if it doesn't feel appropriate." Alina nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I'm planning a Christmas Eve gathering here at the house, nothing too formal but a real celebration with staff and a few friends. I would very much like for you and Sophia to attend as guests, not as staff. And I was hoping that Sophia and Daniel might be willing to play some Christmas music on the piano for everyone." Daniel is very excited about the idea. Alina's face showed a complex mix of emotions. "Mr. Harrison, that is very kind, but I'm not sure it's appropriate for Sophia and me to attend as guests. We are staff. The other employees might feel it strange or unfair." "I'm inviting the staff to attend as well," Richard explained. "This isn't meant to be one of those events where there's a rigid separation between family and employees. I want it to feel like a community celebration. You and Sophia wouldn't be the only staff members there. But we would be the only ones performing," Alina pointed out gently. "The only ones being put forward as entertainment alongside your son. People will wonder why. They will think we are trying to elevate ourselves, to take advantage of Daniel's friendship with Sophia." Richard sighed, recognizing the validity of her concerns. Alina was navigating social waters that were far more complicated for her than they were for him. She had to think about how other staff members might perceive her, about maintaining professional relationships, about not appearing to overstep or presume. "I understand your concerns," Richard said, "and I respect them. But I hope you'll consider it anyway. Not because I'm your employer asking something of you, but because it would make Daniel genuinely happy. He wants to share what he's learned with people. He wants to celebrate with his friend. And honestly, Mrs. Santos, I want to create a Christmas that feels meaningful again. Your daughter has brought music and life back into this house. Allowing her and Daniel to share that with others feels like the right way to celebrate." Alina was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "Can I think about it?" she finally asked. "Can I talk to Sophia and see how she feels?" "Of course," Richard said, "there's no pressure. If you decide it's not right for you, we'll do something else. The gathering will happen regardless, and you would be welcome to attend simply as guests without any performance involved." Alina nodded slowly. "I will talk to my daughter and Mr. Harrison, I appreciate that you are trying to include us. It is strange for me, this situation. In my country, there are also class differences, also lines between employer and employee. But here it feels different somehow, maybe because I am an immigrant, maybe because I am still learning how things work in this culture. I want to do what is right for Sophia without causing problems. I understand, Richard said. And whatever you decide, I respect your judgment. You know what's best for your daughter. That evening, Alina sat with Sophia in their small apartment and explained the invitation. She watched her daughter's face carefully, trying to gauge her genuine feelings rather than just her immediate enthusiasm. Mr. Harrison wants you and Daniel to play piano for people at Christmas. Sophia repeated, her eyes wide. Like a real concert. A small performance, yes. But Sophia, you need to think about this carefully. There will be adults there, people who work for Mr. Harrison, people who might judge us. Some people might think we are showing off or trying to be more important than we are. And if you make mistakes while playing, people will see. Sophia considered this seriously, her young face showing concentration. Would Daniel be nervous? She asked. I mean, it's his house and his father's party, but he might be scared to play in front of people. Alina felt a surge of affection for her daughter, who was thinking first about her friend's comfort rather than her own concerns. He might be. Would that make you nervous? A little, Sophia admitted, but I think we could do it if we practiced a lot. And Mom, I've never played for an audience before. My grandmother was the only person who ever heard me play, and that was on her old broken piano. This would be on a beautiful Steinway, and people would really listen. That's kind of amazing, isn't it? Well, it is amazing, Alina agreed softly. You've worked hard at your music and you've been a good teacher to Daniel. If we say yes and you do this performance, I will be very proud of you. Well, then I want to do it, Sophia said with growing confidence. I want to play Christmas music with Daniel for everyone. It will be fun, and even if I make mistakes, that's okay. That's part of learning, right? That's what I always tell Daniel when he makes mistakes. Alina smiled at her daughter's logic, the way Sophia was applying her own teaching philosophy to herself. Okay then, we will say yes. But Sophia, we must work hard to prepare. We cannot just play anyway. If we are going to do this, we must do our best. We will, Sophia promised. I'll tell Daniel tomorrow and we'll practice every day until Christmas. True to her word, Sophia threw herself into preparation with impressive dedication. The piano sessions, which had previously been relaxed and exploratory, took on a new sense of purpose. She and Daniel worked through a set list of 5 Christmas songs, practicing each one until they could play it consistently well. Sophia taught Daniel not just the notes but also how to handle performance pressure, how to recover if he made a mistake, how to use expression and dynamics to make the music engaging. Richard, listening to their practice sessions, was continually impressed by Sophia's teaching ability. She had natural pedagogical instincts, breaking down complex tasks into manageable steps, offering encouragement balanced with honest assessment, pushing Daniel to improve while also knowing when he needed a break or a confidence boost. For someone so young, she demonstrated remarkable emotional intelligence. As Christmas approached, the Harrison household underwent a transformation. Richard hired additional decorators to supplement what the staff usually did, but this time he was personally involved in the planning. He selected a massive evergreen tree for the main entrance hall and had it decorated with thousands of lights and ornaments. He had garlands hung throughout the house, filling rooms with the scent of fresh pine. He hired a chef to prepare a special Christmas Eve menu featuring both traditional American holiday foods and Filipino dishes, a gesture toward Alina and Sophia's culture that made Alina tear up when she heard about it. The staff noticed the change in Richard's demeanor. He smiled more, engaged in conversations rather than just issuing instructions, seemed more present in his own home. Margaret remarked to Thomas the groundskeeper that it was like watching Mr. Harrison wake up from a long sleep. The entire atmosphere of the estate felt lighter, less like a museum and more like a home. Daniel was nervous as Christmas Eve approached, but it was the good kind of nervous, the anticipatory excitement of someone about to do something challenging and meaningful. He practiced obsessively, playing through the songs in his mind even when he was not at the piano, mentally rehearsing every note and transition. Sophia was nervous too, though she tried to hide it. She had her mother help her pick out a nice dress from the thrift store, a dark green velvet dress that Alina carefully altered to fit perfectly. It was not new or expensive, but it was beautiful. And when Sophia tried it on, she felt special in a way she rarely experienced. Alina had so few resources for extras like this, but seeing her daughter's face light up when she looked in the mirror made the expense worthwhile. On the afternoon of Christmas Eve, Sophia arrived at the Harrison house earlier than usual, with her mother accompanying her. They used the main entrance rather than the staff entrance, following Richard's explicit instructions. Alina felt strange walking through the grand front doors as a guest, carrying a small wrapped present she had insisted on bringing despite having almost no spare money. It was a token gesture, a handmade picture frame she had crafted herself with materials from a craft store, but she could not arrive at someone's home for Christmas without bringing something. The house was magnificent in its holiday decoration, twinkling with lights and filled with the rich sense of pine and cinnamon and cooking food. A string quartet was playing gentle background music in the corner of the main hall, creating an atmosphere of elegant celebration. Staff members were arriving as well, dressed in their best clothes, looking both pleased and slightly uncomfortable with being treated as guests in a space where they usually worked. Daniel found Sophia within minutes of her arrival, his face bright with excitement and nerves. "You're here, I've been waiting. Do you want to practice one more time before everyone arrives? I'm kind of scared I'll forget everything when people are actually watching." "I'm scared too," Sophia admitted. "But we've practiced so much, we know these songs really well, we're going to be great." They retreated to the music room for a final run-through, playing through their set list with Richard standing in the doorway watching. When they finished, he walked over to them, his face showing an emotion that neither child could quite identify. "That was beautiful," Richard said simply. "Your mother would be so proud," he added, looking at Daniel. "She would have loved hearing you play her piano." Daniel's face showed a complicated mix of pleasure and sadness at the mention of his mother. "I wish she could be here," he said quietly. "I do too," Richard said, his voice thick. "But I think in a way she is. Every time you play that piano, every time you make music, you're keeping her love of music alive." "That's a gift, Daniel." Sophia, witnessing this intimate moment between father and son, felt like perhaps she should excuse herself, but neither of them seemed to want her to leave. She realized that she had become, in some unexpected way, part of their family's healing process. Her friendship with Daniel had opened something in this house, had allowed grief to coexist with joy, had made it possible for a father and son to begin reconnecting. As evening fell and guests gathered in the main hall, Richard called for everyone's attention. About 30 people were present, staff members and their families, a few of Richard's business associates who had become genuine friends over the years, and Margaret's adult daughter who had come from the city. The atmosphere was warm and convivial, with people holding glasses of wine or cider, the string quartet having finished their set and now mingling with guests. "Thank you all for coming," Richard said, his voice carrying across the hall. "This is the first real Christmas celebration this house has seen in several years, and I'm grateful to share it with all of you. I've learned this year that the most valuable things in life are not the things money can buy. They're the connections we make, the relationships we build, the moments of genuine joy we experience together." He paused, his gaze moving to where Daniel and Sophia stood near the piano, both children dressed nicely and looking nervous. "My son Daniel has discovered a love of music this year, thanks to the kindness and generosity of a very special young teacher. Tonight, I'd like to invite Daniel and Sophia Santos to share some Christmas music with us. They've worked very hard to prepare this for you, and I'm incredibly proud of both of them." There was warm applause as Sophia and Daniel made their way to the piano bench. Sophia sat on the left side, Daniel on the right, their positions well practiced from months of sitting together. Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she positioned them over the keys, and she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She leaned toward Daniel and whispered, "Ready." "Ready," Daniel confirmed, though his voice was tight with nerves. Sophia counted them in quietly, and they began with Silent Night, the song they had polished most carefully. The first few measures were tentative, both children hyper-aware of the audience watching and listening. But as the familiar melody unfolded, as their fingers found the patterns they had practiced countless times, the nervousness began to recede. The music took over, carrying them past their fear into the simple joy of playing together. They moved through their set list, Silent Night followed by Jingle Bells, then the first Noel, O Come All Ye Faithful, and finishing with a simple but lovely arrangement of What Child Is This? Each song showcased different aspects of their playing. Some featured Sophia's melody with Daniel providing gentle accompaniment. Others had them trading back and forth, creating a conversation between their hands. The final piece was a duet where they played in harmony, their parts interweaving in a way that sounded far more sophisticated than two children with less than a year of playing experience should have been able to achieve. There were small mistakes, moments where Daniel's timing was slightly off or Sophia's fingers hit a wrong note, but they had learned to recover gracefully, to keep the music flowing without stopping to fix errors. And more importantly, there was genuine feeling in their performance. They were not just hitting the right notes in the right order. They were telling stories through the music, conveying the peace of a silent holy night, the exuberance of bells and winter joy, the wonder of the nativity story. When they finished the final song, letting the last chord ring out through the hall before lifting their hands from the keys, There was a moment of complete silence. Then the room erupted in applause, genuine and enthusiastic. People were smiling, some were dabbing at their eyes, moved by the simple beauty of what they had witnessed. Alina stood near the back of the hall, tears streaming down her face as she clapped. She had known her daughter was musical, had known Sophia had been taking these piano lessons with Daniel, but seeing her child perform with such poise and skill, seeing the joy on Sophia's face and the pride on Daniel's was almost overwhelming. All the sacrifices she had made, all the long hours of work, all the uncertainty and struggle of building a life in a new country. In this moment it all felt worthwhile. Richard walked to the piano as the applause continued, placing a hand on each child's shoulder. "Thank you both," he said, loudly enough for the room to hear. "That was a wonderful gift you've given us all tonight." Daniel was beaming, his face flushed with the thrill of having successfully completed the performance. Sophia was smiling too, relief and pride mixing in her expression. They had done it. They had played for an audience, had shared their music with others, and it had been received with warmth and appreciation. The rest of the evening unfolded with the kind of easy joy that characterizes the best celebrations. People ate the excellent food, complimented the decorations, talked and laughed and shared stories. The rigid boundaries between employer and employee, between family and staff, seemed less important in the warmth of genuine fellowship. Richard moved through the crowd, speaking with everyone, thanking them for their work throughout the year, asking about their families and lives. He found Alina at one point and drew her aside for a private word. "Mrs. Santos, your daughter is extraordinary. You should be very proud." "I am," Alina said, her voice still thick with emotion. "Mr. Harrison, I don't know how to thank you for this. For allowing Sophia to learn music, to be friends with Daniel, to have this experience tonight. These are things I could never have given her myself." "You've given her something far more valuable," Richard said seriously. "You've taught her kindness, respect, perseverance, and generosity. Those qualities are what make her a good teacher and a good friend. The piano is just an instrument. Who Sophia is as a person that comes from you." Their conversation was interrupted by Margaret approaching with practical questions about the evening's schedule. But Alina walked away from the exchange feeling seen and valued in a way that was rare in her experience as a domestic worker. Richard Harrison was not perfect, and the inequality between their positions remained a fundamental reality, but he was trying to bridge that gap with genuine respect, and that meant something. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Richard gathered the household staff who were still present and distributed envelopes to each of them. The Christmas bonuses he gave were considerably more generous than usual, his way of acknowledging that a business could not function without the people who did the actual work, that their labor had value beyond the standard wages he paid. When he gave Alina her envelope, he added quietly, "There's something extra in there. I'd like Sophia to have formal piano lessons if she's interested. Consider this a scholarship of sorts, compensation for the teaching she's been providing Daniel. She has real talent and it should be developed properly." Alina started to protest, to say it was too much, that they could not accept charity, but Richard raised his hand gently. "Please, it's not charity. Your daughter has given my son something precious. Allow me to give something back. And honestly, if Sophia continues to improve, she'll be an even better teacher for Daniel. It benefits both of them." The practical justification allowed Alina to accept the gift with less discomfort, though she still felt the weight of obligation that came with receiving such generosity. She thanked him sincerely and tucked the envelope away to look at later in private. Sophia and Daniel found each other again before Sophia had to leave, both children still riding the high of their successful performance. "That was so fun," Daniel exclaimed. "I was so scared at first, but then it was just like practicing except with people watching. Did you hear them clapping? They really liked it." "They loved it," Sophia confirmed, smiling at his enthusiasm. "You played really well, Daniel. I'm proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without you teaching me," Daniel said seriously. "You're the best teacher ever and the best friend." "You're my best friend too," Sophia said warmly. They had established this fact before, but it felt worth repeating in the glow of their shared triumph. As Alina and Sophia walked back to their apartment that night, both of them carrying leftovers that the chef had insisted they take, Sophia was chattering excitedly about every detail of the evening. Alina listened with a smile, delighting in her daughter's happiness while also feeling a complex undercurrent of concern that she could not quite name. Later, after Sophia had gone to bed, Alina opened the envelope Richard had given her. Along with a bonus that was triple what she had expected, there was a check made out to an amount that would cover a full year of piano lessons at one of the area's respected music schools, along with a note in Richard's handwriting. "For Sophia's continued education. She has earned this and more. Thank you for allowing your daughter to bring joy back into our home." Alina sat alone in the small living room of their apartment, holding the check and the note, and allowed herself to cry. They were complicated tears, mixing gratitude and relief and worry and something like grief. She was grateful for the generosity, relieved that Sophia would have opportunities she could never have afforded otherwise, worried about the implications and obligations this created, and grieving perhaps for the simplicity of a life where boundaries were clear and expectations were straightforward. She thought about her daughter sleeping peacefully in the next room, dreaming probably of piano music and applause and friendship. She thought about how Sophia's life was unfolding in ways Alina had never imagined, with opportunities arising from unlikely places. She thought about Richard Harrison, a complicated man trying to be better, trying to connect with his son, trying to acknowledge the humanity of people he employed. And she thought about the future, about the uncertain path ahead, about the ways this unusual friendship between the children might continue to shape all their lives in ways none of them could predict. Whatever happened, Alina decided she would face it with the same determination that had brought her halfway around the world seeking a better life. She would protect her daughter, maintain her dignity, work hard, and remain open to both the blessings and the challenges that came with crossing the invisible lines that divided their world. The music that had filled the Harrison house that Christmas Eve had been beautiful, but it was not just the notes and melodies that mattered. It was what the music represented. Connection across difference, growth through teaching and learning, healing through unexpected friendship, and the persistent hope that joy could still be found even after profound loss. In the silence of the late night, Alina whispered a prayer of thanks for all of it, the complicated gift of this strange and wonderful situation, and asked for wisdom to navigate whatever lay ahead. The middle of the story arrives at a time when the quiet bond between the servant's daughter and the blind boy has grown stronger and more natural than anyone expected. And by now their meetings around the piano feel like a safe place where the world outside does not matter. And on this particular day the house feels heavier than usual, as if something unseen is moving closer. The girl comes to work with her mother early in the morning, and she carries a calm expression, yet inside her heart feels restless, because she senses change without knowing why, and as she finishes her chores, she finds herself thinking about the piano room and the boy who waits there with patience and trust. And when she finally enters the room, she notices that he is quieter than usual, sitting upright with his hands resting gently on his lap, as if he is listening for something beyond sound. She greets him softly, and he smiles in response, telling her that he had a strange feeling since waking up and that the house feels different today. And she laughs lightly, trying to keep things normal, yet she too feels it, and they sit together at the piano where she places his fingers on the keys, guiding him slowly and carefully. And as he begins to play the simple notes they have practiced many times, she senses a deeper emotion in his touch, as if he is trying to express something he cannot say. As the music fills the room, her thoughts drift to how much he has changed since they first met, and how his confidence has grown, and how he now listens not just to sound, but to feeling and meaning. And she realizes that teaching him has also changed her, because she now believes more strongly in quiet kindness and shared moments. And while they play, she does not notice the shadow standing just outside the doorway. The boy's father has returned home earlier than planned, and he walks through the halls with the usual authority of a man who controls companies and markets, yet today his steps slow when he hears the piano, and he stops without meaning to, because something about the music feels sincere and unguarded, and unlike the polished performances he has heard at grand events. And he stands still, listening without interrupting. From where he stands, he sees his son at the piano, and he feels a sudden tightening in his chest, because he rarely allows himself to watch his son closely due to guilt and helplessness. And he sees the servant's daughter standing beside him, guiding his hands with care and patience. And there is nothing forced in her posture and nothing expected in return, and this surprises him more than any business loss ever has. Inside the room, the girl encourages the boy to try a new sequence, and he hesitates, fearing mistakes, and she reassures him with a calm voice, telling him that mistakes are only part of learning. And he nods, trusting her completely, and begins to play again. And this time the melody flows with more confidence and feeling, and his face softens, as if he can finally see the music even without sight. The father feels his throat tighten as he watches this simple exchange, and memories rise of all the moments he missed, because he believed providing money was enough. And he realizes that this girl, whom he barely noticed, has given his son something priceless, which is belief and patience and time. And he stays hidden, unwilling to disturb the moment, yet unable to walk away. As the music ends, the boy smiles widely and turns his head slightly, as if sensing another presence, and he asks quietly if someone else is there. And the girl freezes for a moment, sensing it too, and she looks toward the doorway where the father now steps forward, revealing himself. And the room fills with silence that feels heavy yet honest. The girl immediately lowers her head out of respect and fear, unsure if she has done something wrong, and the boy straightens, asking who it is, and the father speaks gently, telling him it is his father, and the tone in his voice is different than usual, softer and uncertain. And the boy smiles, unaware of the expression on his father's face, and says he is glad he heard him play today. The father looks at the girl and thanks her sincerely in a voice that surprises even himself, and she nods quietly, feeling both nervous and relieved. And in that moment, the balance of power in the room shifts not through words but through understanding, and this is the moment when everything begins to change, though none of them fully realize it yet. This part of the story marks a turning point where silent observation becomes awareness, and where kindness is finally seen by the one who matters most. And the piano room, which once held only two quiet souls, now holds the weight of truth recognition and the beginning of transformation. If any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content. Without them, the fifth part of the story unfolds. After the moment of recognition, when the father has seen with his own eyes what kindness looks like inside his own home. And the days that follow carry a different tone, as if the walls themselves are listening more closely. And the servant's daughter feels this shift even before anyone speaks about it, because small changes begin to appear in quiet ways. Her mother notices that their work schedule becomes less rushed and less strict, and the house manager no longer speaks with sharp commands. And although no explanation is given, the air feels lighter, and the girl senses that the piano room has become a place of quiet importance, rather than a hidden corner of the house. And each time she walks toward it, she feels both gratitude and worry, because attention can change things in ways that are not always safe. The blind boy also feels the change, though he cannot see it, and he tells the girl that his father has been spending more time near him, asking gentle questions and listening without interrupting. And this surprises the boy, because he is not used to being heard in this way. And as he shares this with her, his voice carries hope mixed with uncertainty, and she listens carefully, reminding him that he deserves this care and always has. One afternoon, the father asks the girl's mother if her daughter can continue helping his son with music more regularly, and the request is polite and sincere. And this moment fills the mother with confusion and pride at the same time, because she has always taught her daughter to stay invisible, and now invisibility is no longer possible. And the girl stands quietly nearby, feeling the weight of being seen for the first time by someone powerful. As the lessons continue, the music grows deeper and more expressive, and the boy begins to play not just notes but feelings, and the girl adjusts her teaching, allowing him more freedom and encouraging his instincts. And she realizes that he no longer needs guidance for every movement, because he has learned to trust himself. And this realization fills her with a quiet joy that feels both warm and bittersweet. The father often listens from a distance, sometimes sitting openly in the room without speaking, and his presence no longer feels heavy but thoughtful. And he begins to ask the girl about her own dreams and future. And these questions make her uncomfortable, because she has never allowed herself to imagine beyond daily survival. And she answers honestly, saying she has never thought that far, and the father listens without judgment, which changes something inside her. At the same time, rumors begin to move through the household staff, and whispers of favoritism and concern begin to surface. And the girl becomes aware that kindness can also bring risk, and her mother warns her gently to remain humble and careful, reminding her that attention can disappear as quickly as it arrives. And the girl understands this truth, yet she also feels that something deeper is unfolding that cannot be undone. The blind boy grows more confident and begins to speak openly about his feelings and fears, and one evening he tells the girl that he feels stronger when he plays, and that the music helps him imagine the world in colors he cannot see. And this confession touches her deeply, because she realizes that their bond has given him a language beyond sight, and she feels honored to be part of that growth. The father watches this transformation with a mixture of pride and regret, and he begins to reflect on how wealth protected him from discomfort, but also from understanding. And he sees that his son's strength has come not from money but from patience and shared presence. And this awareness pushes him to reconsider how he lives and how he treats those around him. This part of the story is about quiet expansion, where hearts open slowly and trust deepens without promises or dramatic declarations. And the piano continues to be the center, where lives intersect, not as master and servant, not as rich and poor, but as people sharing moments that shape their futures in ways none of them fully understand yet. If any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content. Without them, the sixth part of the story moves forward, as the quiet harmony that formed around the piano begins to face the pressure of the outside world. And while the music remains steady, the emotions around it grow more complex and more fragile with each passing day. The servant's daughter starts to notice changes in how people look at her when she walks through the house, and the glances carry curiosity and judgment, and sometimes resentment. And she understands that not everyone sees kindness as something pure, and some see it as a threat to order and balance, and this awareness makes her more careful with her words and movements. The blind boy continues to grow in confidence, and his playing becomes more expressive, and he no longer waits for approval before letting his feelings guide his hands, and this freedom brings him joy. But it also brings questions, and he begins to ask his father about his future and what place music might have in it. And these questions make the father pause, because they touch a part of him he once ignored. The father finds himself caught between two worlds, one shaped by control, reputation, and power, and the other shaped by patience, humility, and presence. And he begins to feel the strain of trying to hold both at once. And late at night, He reflects on his own childhood and the moments where he was taught to hide emotion in order to succeed, and he wonders if that lesson was ever truly right. Meanwhile, the girl's mother grows increasingly worried, and she reminds her daughter that kindness does not protect against consequences, and that the house still belongs to people who may change their minds without warning. And the daughter listens with respect, yet her heart tells her that what she shares with the boy is something honest and necessary, and not something that should be hidden away out of fear. One evening, a guest visits the house, someone important from the father's business world, and during the visit, the blind boy is asked to play, and the request feels different from before because it carries expectation rather than curiosity, and the girl senses the shift immediately, and she stands beside the boy, offering quiet reassurance while feeling tension rise in her chest. As the boy begins to play, the room fills with sound that is beautiful yet vulnerable, and some guests listen with admiration while others see only a display, and the father watches closely, noticing how the boy stiffens under the weight of being observed. And in that moment, he realizes how easily a gift can be turned into a burden when it is shaped by pride instead of care. After the guests leave, the house returns to silence, and the boy admits that he felt afraid and exposed, and the girl listens without trying to fix the feeling. And she tells him that it is acceptable to feel unsure, and that music should never belong to anyone else's expectations, and her words ground him and remind him of the safety they built together. The father overhears this exchange and feels a sharp clarity, and he understands that protection does not come from walls or wealth, but from allowing a child to grow without fear of performance. And this realization brings both relief and sorrow, because it shows him how much he has yet to learn. This part of the story carries a quiet tension where growth invites challenge and where intentions are tested by circumstance. And the piano remains at the center, not as a stage, but as a place of truth where each character must decide what truly matters and what they are willing to change in order to protect it. If any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content. Without them, the seventh part of the story unfolds, as the quiet truths that have been forming can no longer remain unspoken. And each character begins to feel the weight of choice pressing gently but firmly on their lives. And the piano room, which once felt like a refuge, now becomes a place where honesty must stand on its own. The blind boy grows more aware of himself and his place in the world, and he begins to ask deeper questions, not only about music, but about independence and worth. And one evening, he tells the girl that he does not want to be treated as fragile or impressive, but simply as capable. And this request comes from a place of maturity that surprises even him. And the girl listens with respect, realizing that he has reached a point where guidance must turn into trust. The girl herself feels torn between loyalty to her mother and the quiet calling she feels inside her heart. And she begins to understand that her kindness has given her a voice even if she never asked for one. And she struggles with the fear that using that voice might cost her the safety she has always known. And yet remaining silent now feels like a kind of dishonesty to herself. The father faces his own turning point as he watches his son grow stronger in ways that cannot be measured or controlled. And he feels both pride and fear, because supporting this growth means letting go of the image he once planned. And he realizes that love demands risk and presence, rather than distance and protection alone. A moment arrives when the father speaks openly to the girl, and her mother, expressing gratitude and acknowledging that what his son has gained cannot be bought or arranged, and his words are sincere and measured. And for the first time, there is no barrier of status in the room, only shared recognition. And this moment shifts something deep within all of them. The household staff continues to whisper, but the tone changes as respect begins to replace suspicion. And the girl notices that some people now look at her not with envy, but with understanding, and this change does not make her feel powerful, but it makes her feel seen in a way that is calm and grounding. The boy plays the piano one evening alone while the others listen quietly, and his music carries confidence without urgency and emotion without display, and it reflects a balance he has found within himself. And when he finishes, there is no applause, only silence that feels full and honest. And in that silence, each person understands that something meaningful has settled into place. This part of the story is about acceptance and courage, where fear no longer dictates every decision, and where love begins to show itself through respect and listening. And the path forward becomes clearer, not because all problems are solved, but because the people involved are finally willing to walk it together. If any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content. Without them, the eighth part of the story brings a quiet sense of resolution, where life does not suddenly become perfect, but it becomes more honest and more balanced, and each person carries forward changed in ways that feel lasting rather than dramatic. The servant's daughter continues her work in the house, yet her role is no longer defined only by silence and routine, and she is treated with a steady respect that feels natural rather than forced. And she remains grounded, choosing not to seek attention or reward, because what matters to her is the knowledge that her kindness created something real, and she carries that strength quietly into her future. Her mother finds peace in seeing her daughter valued not for obedience but for character, and she no longer fears every step her daughter takes, because she sees that humility and courage can exist together, and this understanding lifts a weight she has carried for many years. The blind boy grows into himself with confidence and patience, and music becomes a companion rather than a test. And he continues to play not to impress but to express, and his father supports this with a presence that is calm and consistent, and their relationship deepens through shared time and honest conversation rather than control or expectation. The father changes his way of moving through the world, and those who work for him notice that his leadership softens without losing strength, and he listens more than he speaks. And he understands that true influence comes from care and awareness rather than authority alone, and this shift shapes not only his home, but the choices he makes beyond it. The piano room remains a place of meaning, but it no longer holds secrecy or tension, and it becomes a symbol of what happens when people truly see one another without labels or distance, and the music that fills it carries memory, gratitude, and quiet hope. Life continues with its ordinary challenges, yet the foundation beneath it is stronger, and each character moves forward knowing that a single act of kindness shared without expectation can change paths and reveal truths that were always waiting to be acknowledged. The story closes not with a grand ending, but with a steady sense of growth, where love, respect, and understanding remain present in everyday moments. And this is what makes the story real and enduring. If any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content without them.